Welcome to the History in Pixels channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one. The camera arrived in the 19th century and changed one simple thing. For the first time, it was possible to capture a living animal shortly before it disappeared from the planet. Number 1. The bucardo was a wild mountain goat of the Pyrenees on the border of Spain and France. By the end of the 20th century, it was already far too rare. In 1981, there were about 30 left, then just one. The scientists gave her a name, Celia. She carried alone the future of an entire subspecies on her back. On January 6 of the year 2000, they found Celia dead in a reserve in northern Spain. A tree had fallen on top of her. Before Celia died, the researchers had stored a piece of her skin in a frozen tank. Number 2, the thyloin, known as the Tasmanian tiger, had no relation whatsoever to a tiger or a wolf. It was a carnivorous marsupial with stripes on its back and a pouch to raise its young, just like a kangaroo. It lived in Tasmania, Australia. The ranchers swore it killed sheep, so the government put a bounty on the animal's head. Between 1888 and 1909, they paid for every animal killed. Thousands were hunted during that period. The hunting worked far too quickly. In a matter of decades, the thyloin had practically vanished from the wild. In the end, a single animal remained in captivity at the Hobart Zoo. He became known as Benjamin. In 1933, someone filmed him pacing back and forth in his cage, opening that enormous jaw. That is the image that survived. On September 7, 1936, Benjamin died. By the accounts, he had been left outside the shelter on a freezing night and did not survive. The cruel detail is the timing. In 1936, the same year the last one died in a cage, Tasmania finally declared the species protected. Too late by a matter of months. Since then, reports have surfaced of people who swear they have seen a living thyloin in the bush year after year without ever producing solid proof. Number 3, on the island of Unguja in Zanzibar, Tanzania, there lived a leopard smaller than those on the mainland with spots instead of rosettes. But what sealed its fate was not ordinary hunting. It was belief. The population believed that sorcerers raised these leopards in secret and sent them to attack people. In 1948, these attacks killed 3 residents of the same area within weeks. Among them, a boy and an elderly woman. Fear turned to panic. After the Zanzibar Revolution in 1964, things spiraled out of control. The government backed an extermination campaign led by a witch hunter. Killing the leopards became official policy tied to the idea of cleansing the island of witches. There are accounts of public ceremonies where hunters used their own children as bait and burned the animals' eyes with hot irons. By the early 1980s, nobody could confirm a living leopard on the island. Officially, Tanzania declared the Zanzibar leopard extinct, but the locals never bought that version. To this day, people in rural areas swear that sorcerers still hide leopards in the bush. In 2018, a camera trap set up during a TV show filming captured what appeared to be one of them, and hope returned. Number 4, the ivory-billed woodpecker was one of the largest woodpeckers in the world, living in the forests of the southeastern United States and Cuba. It was so imposing it earned a religious nickname. People shouted the Lord's name upon seeing one. It depended on old enormous trees. When the logging companies began felling those forests, the bird disappeared along with them. The last indisputable record in the United States is from 1944 in Louisiana. In 1935, before almost anyone realized it was vanishing, a team managed to film the bird alive. Decades later, in 2004, a group from Cornell University dropped a bombshell. They claimed to have rediscovered the woodpecker in a swamp in Arkansas. They published in the journal Science with 7 sightings in a shaky 4-second video. The bird-watching world exploded. But then the top experts analyzed the tape and said it was a different common woodpecker. The debate never closed. The American government went so far as to propose declaring the woodpecker officially extinct, but pulled back in the face of doubt, and the decision remains stuck. Meanwhile, people continue entering the swamps looking for it. Some claim to have seen one alive in 2019. There is real footage from 1935 showing the bird. There's a blurry video from 2004 that nobody can prove or disprove. And there is an enormous swamp where perhaps the lagod bird is still hiding. Number 5. The Caspian tiger was one of the largest big cats that ever existed. It lived in a vast range stretching from Turkey to Iran and Central Asia, hunting wild boar and deer along riverbanks. It was a giant with broad paws and brute strength. At the beginning of the 20th century, Soviet land settlement projects tore apart its habitat. Hunting surged. The military even exterminated the prey the tiger depended on for food. The last confirmed sighting was around 1970 in Turkey. After that, nothing. In 2003, the Caspian tiger was declared extinct. But there is a DNA twist. Studies showed it was nearly identical to the Siberian tiger, which still exists. Because of this, there are projects aiming to release Siberian tigers into the former territory of the Caspian tiger to fill the space that was left empty. The giant vanished, but perhaps a shadow of it will hunt again where it once hunted. Number 6. The passenger pigeon may have been the most numerous bird that ever existed in North America. There were billions. When a flock took flight, it could darken the sky for hours, sometimes for entire days, like a living cloud of wings passing over the cities. It seemed impossible that something so abundant could ever end. Then the European settlers cut down the forests where the pigeons lived, and the hunting began in earnest. The problem was that the passenger pigeon was easy, cheap food. It became meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the entire country. Hunters killed en masse, felling trees full of nests, and shooting into the flocks. In a few decades, a population of billions plummeted to almost nothing. What seemed too abundant to ever disappear proved fragile. In the end, a single female remained, raised in captivity at the Cincinnati Zoo. They gave her a name, Martha. Martha lived her final years alone, the last passenger pigeon on the planet. When she died on September 1, 1914, the entire species died with her. Number 7. The Bali tiger was the smallest of all tigers and lived only on the island of Bali in Indonesia. The Dutch colonists turned tiger hunting into a sport with organized expeditions while the island was converted to plantations and the habitat shrank. The animal held a strong place in local beliefs. It was said that powdered tiger whisker was an undetectable poison and parts of the animal became protective amulets. The last confirmed Bali tiger was a female, shot dead in September of 1937 in the west of the island. And here is the detail that sets this case apart from almost every other. No photograph or film of a living Bali tiger exists. It was never kept in a zoo. The only images that survived are of hunters posing next to dead tigers, like the 1911 trophy of a Hungarian baron. Number 8. On Pinta Island in the Galapagos, there lived thousands of giant tortoises with saddle-shaped shells. In the 19th century, whalers and sailors took these animals alive onto their ships as food that lasted months without water or feed. The slaughter was so great that by 1906, they believed only 3 remained. They stuffed all 3 for a museum and considered the matter closed. But one tortoise had escaped the count. In 1971, a scientist studying snails spotted a lone male on a hillside stripped bare by goats. They named him Lonesome George. They offered $10,000 for a female of the same species. Nobody ever collected the reward. His keeper, Fausto, pedaled every day to see him for nearly 40 years. George died on June 24, 2012. Attenborough had filmed him 14 days earlier. With George, Pin Island lost its last voice. Number 9. The Caribbean monk seal was the only seal native to the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. Sailors called it the sea wolf. Its first recorded mention in history is the worst possible. In August of 1494, on Columbus' second voyage, the crew went ashore on an island and killed 8 of them for food. It was the first mammal of the New World to enter European records and the first to be hunted by them. After that, it was downhill for centuries. They hunted the seals for their fat, which was turned into oil. In 1513, Ponlian's crew killed 14 in a single go. By the end of the 17th century, plantation owners had hundreds killed each night just to lubricate machinery. From a population of hundreds of thousands, nothing remained. The last confirmed sighting was in 1952. The animal Columbus encountered upon first contact with the New World was wiped out by the very same world that arrived. Number 10. The Barber lion lived in the Atlas Mountains of North Africa. It was a lion with a dark, heavy mane that extended down to the belly, adapted to the mountain cold. For centuries, these lions fought in the arenas of the Roman Empire and were gifts of kings. They were the kind of beast that entered people's imaginations through sheer size and appearance. By the beginning of the 20th century, hunting and firearms had already pushed the animal to the brink. The most striking image of the wild Barber lion was taken in 1925 in an unlikely way from inside an airplane. The photographer Marcelin Flandin was flying over the Atlas on the Casablanca-Dar route when he spotted a solitary lion below and fired the camera. It is the last visual record of the wild beast. The last free lion in the region was shot dead around the 1960s. Descendants survive in zoos, but the king of the Atlas, free and wild, lives only in that photo from above. Number 11. The gastric brooding frog lived in small pockets of eastern Australia and had a way of raising its young that exists in no other animal. The mother swallowed her own eggs. Inside her stomach, digestion simply stopped working and the belly became a nursery. The tadpoles developed there in the place where food would normally be dissolved by acid. It was an animal's stomach functioning as a womb. When the time came, the mother opened her mouth and released the fully formed young into the world. Scientists discovered this in the 1970s and barely had time to study it. Within about 10 years, both species vanished. The likely culprit is a fungus that attacks the skin of amphibians, combined with deforestation. Today, researchers are trying to bring the frog back and have already produced embryos in the earliest stages. The strangest animal Australia ever had became just photographs and a promise. Number 12. The quagga looked like an unfinished experiment of nature. It was a subspecies of zebra from southern Africa, but it only had stripes on the front half of its body. From the middle back, the stripes faded into a smooth brown with the legs and belly nearly white. From the front, a zebra. From behind, a horse. It lived on the dry plains and was hunted mercilessly for its meat and hide and to free up grazing land for the settlers' cattle. The last wild quagga was killed around 1878. The very last of all, a female, died at the Amsterdam Zoo in 1883. And at the time, nobody understood it was the end. The zoo simply requested that another be captured. There was no other. Real photographs exist of the quagga that lived at the London Zoo, taken while still alive. Today, a project in South Africa crosses zebras to try to recover that lost appearance. The quagga died without anyone realizing it was already the last. Number 13. Schonberg's deer lived in the flooded plains of central Thailand and had a spectacular set of antlers splayed open like a basket with up to 33 points. When the country converted the swamps into rice paddies, the animal lost its home and hunting did the rest. The last wild deer was killed in 1932. The very last of all was tame. Lived at a temple and was beaten to death by a drunk in 1938. The species entered the extinct list and all that remained was a single stuffed animal in Paris and a photograph of a living one taken at the Berlin Zoo in 1911. Then in 1991, a twist. A UN agronomist photographed a fresh set of antlers still reddish with blood at a medicine shop in Laos. A 2019 analysis confirmed it came from a Schomburgk's deer and that the antler was recent. In other words, the animal declared dead in 1938 may have survived in hiding for more than 50 years. Number 14. The golden toad lived in a tiny patch of cloud forest in Monteverde, Costa Rica, and nowhere else on the planet. The males were such a vivid orange they looked metallic. Every breeding season, hundreds gathered at the puddles to mate, forming a carpet of color on the forest floor. In 1987, the researchers still witnessed this spectacle. It was the last time anyone saw the toad in numbers. The following year in 1988, roughly 10 remained. In 1989, a single male was spotted and nobody ever saw another. In 2004, the species was declared extinct. 2 blows struck the toad at the same time. A severe drought dried up the pools where it bred and a fungus that suffocates the skin of amphibians spread through the forest. The golden toad is cited as the first species driven to extinction by climate change. It vanished in a few years from splendor to nothing. Number 15. The Chinese paddlefish was a freshwater monster of the Yangtze River in China. With a long snout resembling a sword, it could exceed 10 feet in length. The Chinese called it the panda of the Yangtze. This fish lineage had existed for roughly 200 million years, meaning it survived the extinction of the dinosaurs and kept swimming. It survived everything except us. In the 1970s, overfishing had already damaged the species. In 1981, China erected a dam on the Yangtze that blocked the fish's path to the only place where they reproduced. Without reproduction, the clock was ticking. The last known individual was tagged and lost its signal shortly after. Footage of the animal exists from 2002 during an attempt to save it. In 2022, it was declared extinct. A fish 200 million years old erased in a few decades. Number 16. The baiji was a freshwater dolphin that existed only in the Yangtze River in China and was treated almost as a deity, the goddess of the river. For 20 million years, it navigated those muddy waters using sonar because seeing there was nearly impossible. But the same river that gave it life became a trap. Pollution, fishing nets, heavy boat traffic, and dams made the Yangtze impossible for the dolphin. In the 1950s, there were thousands. In the 1980s, a few hundred. A male named Chiki lived 22 years in captivity and died in 2002. In 2006, a major expedition scoured the entire river with sonar and boats over 39 days. They did not find a single by along the whole route. The species was declared functionally extinct. It was the first dolphin that humans erased from the map. Where the call of the goddess of the river once echoed, only the noise of engines remained. Number 17. The imperial woodpecker was the largest in the world in its category. Nearly 2 feet long and lived only in the mountains of Mexico. It was a massive bird with a striking crest that depended on old-growth pine forests to survive. Logging companies felled those forests. There are accounts of them poisoning the trees where the birds lived. The animal faded away. There is no confirmed sighting after 1956. The only filmed record of the animal alive is from 1956. The person who filmed it was an American dentist, William Rhee, on the back of a mule, camera in hand. The film is 85 seconds long and was lost for decades until a researcher tracked down the old man and recovered the footage. Ryan described the bird as a big chicken flying in front of him. That is all that remains in motion of the largest woodpecker the world has ever seen. A shaky video of less than 2 minutes. Number 18. The Kauai-oo was a bird from Hawaii, from the island of Kauai with a distinctive voice. Like so many Hawaiian birds, it was destroyed by a combination of forest loss, diseases carried by mosquitoes, and invasive animals that ate eggs and chicks. The population shrank until it was nearly nothing. In 1981, a single living pair remained in the forest. Then a hurricane struck the island and killed the female. A single male was left alone. That male spent the following years singing, but his song was a duet meant to be answered by a female. He sang his part and paused, waiting for the reply that never came. In 1987, they recorded that sound. A bird calling for a partner that no longer existed. It is one of the most difficult recordings to listen to in the history of nature. Number 19. The dusky seaside sparrow was a bird of the salt marshes of Florida in an area now right next to the NASA Space Center. Its habitat was destroyed bit by bit. They sprayed pesticide against mosquitoes, flooded some areas, and drained others. The population plummeted until only 5 birds remained, all males. Without a single purebred female in the world, the species was already doomed before the last bird even died. In a desperate attempt to save the genes, they crossed the last males with females of a similar subspecies. And the work was carried out on an island inside the Disney World complex in Florida. It did not work. The last purebred dusky seaside sparrow, nicknamed Orange Band, died in 1987 right there on Disney property. In 1990, the subspecies was declared extinct. Number 20. The Javan tiger lived on the island of Java in Indonesia, one of the most densely populated islands in the world. Hunting in the destruction of forests to open plantations kept pushing the animal toward the end. A photograph of a living Javan tiger exists, taken in 1938 in the far west of the island. The population continued plummeting in the following decades until by the 1980s the animal was considered extinct in the wild. But the case is not entirely closed. In 2024, researchers analyzed a hair found in Java linked to an encounter with a large cat in 2019. The results showed high genetic similarity to the Javan tiger. It is not definitive proof that the species survived, but it reignited the question, could a handful of them still be hiding on an island full of people? Number 21. The heath hen was a bird of the open fields of the eastern United States related to the prairie chicken. It was hunted for food and sport and lost its habitat to agriculture. In the end, the entire species was squeezed onto a single island, Martha's Vineyard. There, a fire burned a large part of the terrain, and inbreeding did the rest. By 1927, only 13 birds remained. Soon after, just one was left in the entire world. That last one was a male, nicknamed Booming Ben. For years, he appeared during mating season and made the species call, the deep sound meant to attract a female. But there were no more females to answer. He called out to nothing. The last time anyone saw a Booming Ben was March 11, 1932. The heath hen had been one of the first animals people deliberately tried to save, and it still ended with a male calling in an empty field. Number 22. The pulley was a small bird from the island of Maui in Hawaii. Discovered by science only in 1973 when it was already in trouble. It ate forest snails and fell victim to the usual Hawaiian package: loss of forest, mosquito-borne diseases, and predators brought from elsewhere. In a few decades, the population dropped from a few dozen to just 3 birds. They tried to pair a couple, but the female flew back to her own territory and ignored the male. The last pulley was a male, and he had one injured eye, blind. In September of 2004, they captured him in a last attempt to save the species. They did not find a female in time. On November 26th of that year, the bird died in captivity. Too weak to perch, propped up on a towel rolled into a ring. In 2019, the species was declared extinct. They stored his cells frozen in the faint hope of one day bringing back a bird almost nobody ever knew. Number 23. The Spix's macaw is Brazilian from a biome known as the Caatinga. It is the same bird that inspired the movie Rio. Small, blue, it depended on a specific type of tree to nest. Deforestation and illegal capture for the wildlife trade wiped it out in the wild. The last wild specimen, a male, disappeared around the year 2000. In 2019, it was declared extinct in the wild. But the story did not end there. Macaws survived in captivity and a massive effort began to breed them and return them to nature. In 2020, dozens came from Germany to a center in Belgium. The first releases happened in 2022 after decades without a single one flying free. In 2024, chicks were born in the wild Caatinga and took flight for the first time. It seemed like Brazil was winning this one, recovering a species that had already been given up for lost. Then came the blow. In November of 2025, all 11 macaws living free in the wild tested positive for a lethal and incurable virus that attacks the beak and feathers. About 20 birds in captivity also caught it. The triumphant return that seemed certain suddenly became the risk of a second extinction. The Spix's macaw left nature, came back against all odds, and is now fighting again not to vanish. This time against an enemy too small to see. Number 24 or 25. The western black rhinoceros was a subspecies of the black rhinoceros that lived in western and central Africa. It had 2 horns made of keratin, the same material as our fingernails, and it was precisely the horn that condemned it. In some Asian countries, the belief spread that powdered horn had healing powers without any scientific basis. In Yemen, the curved horns were coveted for making dagger handles. With a horn worth a fortune on the black market, the poachers were ruthless. The numbers dropped fast. In 2011, the western black rhinoceros was officially declared extinct. The images that survived are the proof that it really existed and not so long ago. Its close relative, the black rhinoceros, still holds on, but is also hanging by a thread. An entire subspecies was erased because of a belief that was never true.